Good morning. 4 American citizens, including 3 children, killed in Lebanon overnight. I'm Remo, and this is the Daily Signal for September 22nd, 2025. Stay tuned for the rest of the stories.
Unfiltered. Now,
Here are the other top stories for September 22nd, 2025. Story 2. 3 major U.S. allies just broke ranks. UK, Canada, and Australia recognize Palestine as a state. Story 3. Emergency UN Security Council meeting called as Russian jets violate Estonian airspace. Story 4. Massive protests rock Brazil as lawmakers consider pardoning coup plotters. Story 5. Dozens arrested in violent clashes at Philippine presidential palace. Story 6. Israeli strikes kill over 40 in Gaza. Timing couldn't be worse for UN meetings. Story 7. World's richest man, Bernard Arnault, slams France's new billionaire tax. Story 8. Elderly British couple finally freed after Taliban captivity. Qatar brokered the deal. Story 9. Polish soldier spots mysterious radar signal. NATO jets scrambled immediately. Story 10. UN marks 80th anniversary while Secretary General warns of global free fall. Now let's dive into each story. Breaking overnight, 4 American citizens dead in Lebanon, 3 of them children. Here's what happened. Israeli strikes targeting Hezbollah positions hit a residential area where the American family was staying. The Lebanese government confirmed the deaths and immediately contacted U.S. authorities. The victims, a father, mother, and their 3 young children, ages 6, 8, and 10. They were Lebanese Americans visiting extended family in southern Lebanon. Why this matters? This marks the deadliest incident involving U.S. civilians in the current Middle East escalation. The State Department is demanding a full investigation and considering evacuations of remaining Americans in the region. Critical detail. This happened just hours before today's emergency UN Security Council session, timing that will intensify diplomatic pressure on all sides. Meanwhile, America's closest allies just delivered a diplomatic bombshell. The announcement: United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia simultaneously recognized Palestinian statehood this morning. Coordinated timing that caught Washington completely off guard. Here's the key detail. This isn't symbolic. All 3 nations are establishing formal diplomatic relations and opening embassies in Ramallah within 90 days. The White House response: deeply disappointed, according to sources. Secretary of State already on calls with London, Ottawa, and Canberra. Why this matters to you? This fractures the Western Alliance's unified Middle East policy and could accelerate global recognition of Palestine. Currently, only 139 out of 193 UN members recognize Palestinian statehood. The domino effect. European Union members are reportedly considering similar moves, which would isolate U.S. policy further. From the Middle East to Eastern Europe, NATO's eastern border is heating up. What happened? 3 Russian fighter jets crossed into Estonian airspace early this morning, staying for nearly 20 minutes before NATO interceptors forced them back. The emergency response: UN Security Council called an immediate session after Estonia invoked Article 4 consultations. That's the step before Article 5 collective defense. Here's what's different. This wasn't accidental. Russian pilots maintained radio silence and performed deliberate maneuvers over Estonian military installations. Why this matters? Estonia is tiny, just 1.3 million people, but it's a NATO member. Any attack triggers collective defense obligations for all 31 member nations, including the United States. The bigger picture: this is the boldest Russian provocation since the Ukraine invasion began. Putin's testing NATO's resolve, while the alliance is distracted by Middle East crises. In South America, Brazilian democracy faces its biggest test since the military dictatorship ended. The controversy: Congress is debating an amnesty bill that would pardon former President Jair Bolsonaro and allies convicted of attempting to overthrow the government in 2023. The protests: hundreds of thousands filled streets in São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and Brasilia yesterday. Protesters chanted, "No amnesty for coup plotters," and "Democracy is not negotiable." What you need to know: Bolsonaro was convicted and barred from running for office until 2030 after his supporters stormed government buildings trying to prevent Lula from taking power. Brazil's January 6th moment. The political calculation: Bolsonaro's party wants him eligible for the 2026 presidential election. They claim the prosecutions were politically motivated. Why this matters globally? Brazil is Latin America's largest democracy. If coup plotters receive amnesty, it sets a dangerous precedent for democratic backsliding across the region. Violence erupts in Manila as political tensions reach a breaking point. The scene: dozens of protesters arrested in bloody clashes outside Malacañang Palace after police used water cannons and tear gas on demonstrators. What triggered this? Protesters demand President Marcos Jr. address allegations of corruption in his administration's infrastructure projects, specifically missing funds from the Build Better More program. The casualties: at least 23 injured, 47 arrested. Several journalists covering the protests were also detained. Here's the key context. The Philippines is already dealing with tensions over South China Sea disputes with Beijing. Internal political instability weakens Manila's position in regional security discussions. Why you should care? The Philippines hosts major U.S. military bases and is crucial to American Indo-Pacific strategy. Political chaos there affects the entire regional balance against Chinese expansion. Israeli strikes killed over 40 people in Gaza overnight, timing that's about to make UN meetings explosive. The details: health officials report the deadliest single day in Gaza in 3 weeks, with strikes hitting residential buildings in Gaza City and Rafah. The Israeli explanation: military sources claim the targets were Hamas command centers embedded in civilian areas. The diplomatic disaster: these strikes happened less than 12 hours before the UN General Assembly's emergency session on Middle East peace. Why this timing matters? Every UN member will now enter that room with fresh images of civilian casualties. It undermines any Israeli diplomatic efforts and strengthens calls for international intervention. The broader impact: with American civilians now dead in Lebanon and fresh Gaza casualties, the UN Security Council faces maximum pressure to act decisively. 3 quick updates you need to know. France's billionaire battle. LVMH's Bernard Arnault, world's richest man, calls France's proposed wealth tax economic suicide, threatens to relocate company headquarters. Taliban releases hostages. Elderly British couple freed after 2 years in Taliban custody, thanks to Qatari mediation, raising questions about what concessions were made. NATO radar mystery. Polish soldier detected unusual signal patterns before Russian jets appeared over Estonia, suggesting coordinated electronic warfare testing. Here's what connects today's stories and why they matter for your future. The pattern: American global leadership is being challenged simultaneously on 3 fronts. Allies are breaking with U.S. Middle East policy, NATO's eastern border faces direct provocation, and regional democracies are struggling. The Middle East crisis: American civilian deaths in Lebanon change everything. Congress will demand stronger action, but U.S. allies just recognized Palestine, creating impossible diplomatic tensions. The democracy theme: from Brazil's coup amnesty debates to Philippines' palace clashes, democratic institutions are under stress worldwide. This affects global stability and U.S. strategic partnerships. What's coming this week? Watch for 3 critical developments. First, the UN Security Council vote on Estonia. Will it split NATO allies? Second, Brazil's amnesty vote, a test case for Latin American democracy. Third, evacuation plans for Americans in Lebanon, signaling how far this Middle East crisis will escalate. Your key takeaway: we're witnessing a fundamental shift in global alliances. The post-World War II order isn't just changing, it's fragmenting in real time. That's the Daily Signal for September 22nd. I'm Remo. Stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll see you tomorrow with the latest developments on all these breaking stories.
Unfiltered.